Stories are the most powerful thing on earth. They are literally life and death. Wars are waged based on the story of who is the hero and who is the villain. You are the result of a story your parents told each other, the one-night stand, the soulmate, and friends who became so much more. Life and death. So wouldn't you like to understand them better, these stories? How Story Works, an elegant guide to the craft of storytelling by Lani Diane Rich, demystifies stories and helps you understand why you love what you love, why you hate what you hate, and why prologues are almost always a bad idea. How Story Works by Lani Diane Rich. Available on Amazon in ebook, audiobook, and paperback form. Get your copy today.
Welcome to Still Pretty, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast from Chipperish Media. I'm story expert and penis metaphor, Lani Diane Rich.
And I'm film scholar and car guy with a car, Noelle LaCroix. And we're here today to talk about the Zeppo, the 13th episode of Season 3.
The Zeppo aired on January 26, 1999, and was written by Dan Weber and directed by James Whitmore Jr.
You should know that we are a fully spoiled Buffy podcast. That is right. We are going to talk about everything and anything as it comes up. So if you haven't seen the whole series or you're spoiler sensitive, this is not the podcast for you until, you spend a couple weeks just binging all of Buffy.
I love how we open every episode telling people, don't listen to this one.
Don't listen to, you know what? Don't listen to this podcast. This is just not,
ruin it.
It's not worth it. It'll ruin it. Unless you're not spoiler sensitive, and then, welcome on board.
Or you've already seen every episode of it multiple times, which I think is the vast majority of our audience.
Or you get 80 episodes into Still Pretty and you're like, oh, holy shit, they're going to talk about everything? What the? Whoa. All right. Don't worry. I'll steer you around the curves. Let's go on patrol. In the Zeppo, the Scoobies take down a horde of vampires. Well, everyone except Xander, who gets knocked out pretty early in the fight and is told to maybe hang back in the fights in the future. At school, Xander tries to connect with guys tossing a football and accidentally crashes into Jack O'Toole, a full-grown stereotype of the high school bad seed. After he threatens Xander, Cordelia comments on Xander's role in the world, or lack thereof.
I happen to be an integral part of that group.
Integral part of the group? Xander, you're the useless part of the group. You're the Zeppo.
Xander talks with Oz and tries to figure out why he's not getting the sexual attention from women to which he is clearly entitled. Oz tries carefully to talk sense to him, but Xander decides that he just needs to find his thing. Meanwhile, the demonic apocalypse cult, the Sisterhood of Jay, is planning to open the Hellmouth, and things are looking seriously scary on Apocalypse Watch 99. Buffy's scared and needs Willow at her side, and when Xander drives up in his thing, a 57 Chevy Bel Air convertible, Buffy has an important job for him to do.
It's like 2 glazed, 2 cinnamon, a couple cream filled, and a jelly. No, let's round that out to 4 jellies.
Ooh, some evil going on. Must be big for them to entrust you with this daredevil mission.
Right off that interaction with Cordelia, a cute girl admires Xander's car, and he offers to give her a ride. They go to the Bronze, and she rattles on about cars so much that Xander jumps when Angel comes in looking for Buffy, preferring to go do apocalypse stuff than hang out with this chick for one more minute. Angel says it's best that Xander stay out of the way, where he's safe. Later, as he's leaving the Bronze with Nameless Car Girl and ranting about being unappreciated, he bumps into the car parked in front of him, and of course, it belongs to Jack O'Toole. And of course, the psychopath cliche pulls out an unreasonably large knife, and of course, this isn't a penis metaphor. Silly.
Where do you want it? I'm fairly certain I don't want it at all, but thank you.
Okay, maybe it's a penis metaphor. When the cops come, as Jack threatens Xander and Xander doesn't tell on Jack, Jack decides that Xander is cool. He has Xander drive him and Cargirl to the graveyard where he raises his dead friends. Cargirl screams and runs away, good riddance, and Jack and his dead crew co-opt Xander as their wheelman. In one of the cemeteries, Xander bumps into Giles, who is trying to get more information on the rising danger, which is rising and very dangerous.
something different about this. Man, there's something in the air. Stench of death.
Yeah, I think it's Bob.
Jack and his dead crew make Xander drive them to the hardware store, where they break in to get the ingredients to bake a cake, whatever that means. Xander sees Willow coming from the magic shop and wants to know what's going on, but Willow's too freaked out about the end of the world to stay and chat. Xander decides to go after her and help, but Jack stops him.
Xander doesn't feel like he's part of the group.
No, it's just I'm kind of busy.
He doesn't feel like part of the group because he hasn't been initiated.
Do you think he's ready? Great. I want to be in the gang, sure.
All right. Yeah.
That's the spirit.
Yeah.
What do I got to do? You gotta die.
As the gang threatens Xander, he jumps into the car and drives off, then comes up on Faith fighting with a demon. He smashes into the demon with his car, then grabs Faith and drives off. They go back to Faith's motel room, and Faith has a reaction to all that fighting and no kill. She needs some satisfaction. She throws Xander down on the bed and has her way with him. And then...
That was great. I got a shower.
Xander goes out to his car, finds the stuff Jack's gang stole from the hardware store, and realizes that they're not baking a cake. He finds Buffy in a melodramatic moment with Angel and senses it's a bad time. He offers to help, but they send him away. He finds the dead guys and grabs one and drags him alongside the car to get information, but then re-kills him by accidentally knocking his head off with a mailbox. At the school, the Hellmouth tentacle monster breaks through the floor and everyone is ready to fight. Everyone except Xander, who is being chased through the school by Jack and his dead guy gang. Xander manages to take out the dead guys one by one until he meets up with Jack in the basement, where a bomb is ticking away.
I know what you're thinking. Can I get by him? Get upstairs, out of the building, seconds ticking away. I don't love your chances.
Then you'll die too.
Yeah, looks like. So I guess the question really is, who has less fear?
I'm not afraid to die. I'm already dead.
Yeah, but this is different. Being blowed up isn't walking around and drinking with your buddies dead. It's little bits being swept up by a janitor dead, and I don't think you're ready for that.
Are you?
I like the quiet.
Jack disarms the bomb at the last second, and Xander walks away, telling Jack he doesn't want to see him around anymore. Xander leaves, but then werewolf Oz finds Jack and, well, bye-bye, Jack. The next day at school, the Scoobies process their trauma from the night before, and Xander doesn't tell them about his evening. As he walks away, he bumps, once again, into Cordelia.
Ooh, look, it's Mr. Excitement. On another life or death donut mission, or are we just cruising for bimbos again? Giving them lessons in lack of cool. What? What? What?
All right, so Noelle, here's the thing about the Zeppo, is that it is one of those episodes that every time I think of it, I'm like, yeah, that was cute, that was funny, and I never really think there's much there. So just, pulling back the curtain a little bit here at Chipperish Media, I wake up every Sunday morning without having done a thing for Still Pretty, and we record at 11 o'clock my time, right? So I wake up in the morning and I watch the episode, because I've seen these episodes like 1,000 times each, and then I make my little notes and I do my little thing, and I usually make it, relatively on time for a given value of, on time. And this week I get started and I find myself stopping to take so many notes on the Zeppo. And I'm like, we're an hour late recording today. All my fault, because I had so much to say and I never really thought about this being a densely packed episode, but it kind of is. Noelle, what did you think? Was that your experience with this episode?
Well, as you know, I try to watch every episode 2 or 3 times before we record because I'm an overachiever. No, because my last rewatch of the entire series was much longer ago than yours. So I like to, jog my memory and then like re-jog it just to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. And I watched the Zeppo through once. I remembered this is the Xander episode from season 3. Watched it through once and I went, oh my God, what am I going to talk about? Like, it's, that's fine. There's stuff. Watched it through again and holy shit! Like, there's so much. There's so much stuff in this episode and there are so many like little, I don't want to call them like understated, but it's very campy in a lot of ways, but there are these little quiet moments that just kind of are a little bit gut-wrenching when you think about them. So, I mean, we'll get there when we get there, but there's a lot here.
So I've had this kind of reaction to Xander. Like, I love Xander. I think Xander's wonderful, and I remember him really fondly when I think back to the show. But then, as we've been discussing, in Still Pretty, he's problematic in a lot of ways. And we have Light Xander and we have Shadow Xander. And there's been a lot of issues with him. So at times I love him, and at times I want to smack him in the head. And I've never really thought about, like, the pivotal point that the Zeppo, I think, plays in that progression of Xander. That post-Zeppo Xander, I think, is the Xander that I love. For the most part. He's still got a lot of problems. There's still going to be a lot of issues with Xander in the future. But I feel like pre-Zeppo Xander is more Shadow Xander than post-Zeppo Xander. And I'm not sure. And I love saying that. That's actually kind of fun. Post-Zeppo Xander. I feel like I want to make an alcoholic drink, like a cocktail called post-Zeppo Xander. But I think that there may be something to that. So I'm going to keep an eye out to see if, like, the Shadow Xander that we get, I think maybe a different brand of Shadow Xander. Yeah. But it's not quite the same as it was before the Zeppo. I feel like it is a turning point in the series for Xander.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. And I can't say definitively that post Zeppo Xander, that is fun to say.
It's fun, right?
Like, yeah, I can't. Like, nothing is springing to mind as, like, I'm going to point this out as a true, hard example of Xander being changed. But he's definitely changed at the end of the episode. Like,
yeah, no, we see him go through a whole arc in this episode, and we see it through a Cordelia 3-beat, which I really love.
3-beat. I love Cordelia showing up as, like, not quite the narrator, but almost.
Well, she's kind of the thread that pulls it all together. I think that she is the source of, or not the source, but like a representation of the things that Xander knows are wrong with him. She sees it and she points it out and she directly pokes at the sources of his vulnerability. And so I think that she, as a representation of his ability to deal with his own self-doubt, his own lack of confidence and lack of belief in not just his abilities, but his essential value. I think that they use her beautifully for that in this episode. The 3-beat is wonderfully executed. And we do see that progression with him. And at the end, his ability to walk away from her saying nothing with just a smile on his face. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she brings us kind of, if we want to say what this episode is about, capital A about, I mean, it's
right.
Cordelia kind of brings us into that space with, the definition of cool, right? Like, Xander's the boy who had no cool, and she tells him to look it up. And according to Cordelia, our truth teller, Psycho is cooler than wuss, which I think is very interesting, which of course then sets off that whole, Rube Goldberg machine of insecurity that is Xander in his scene with Oz. What is the essence of cool? And he's just he's processing out loud and on and on and on. And Oz is, his Ozzy self, Xander, what is the essence of cool? Not sure. It's so great. It's so great.
But Oz, of course, is absolutely the very definition of cool. And, what cool, I think, actually is, in its ultimate expression, right, is that sense of pure security in yourself that Oz has, right? And Oz has always had that. He is Amazing. I want a bracelet that says, what would Oz do, to remind me to be secure in myself. Like, Oz does not have the kind of essential insecurity that like every other human person has. You know? Like, he knows his value and he doesn't let it take away from anybody else's value. Like, he knows that he's great and he's fine and he doesn't have to worry. But he also doesn't take away from anybody else. He doesn't think he's better than anybody else. He just knows his own value, which I think is really, really cool. And he is kind of this example set for everybody else on how to behave, how to treat people, how to think, you know? And then we have him kind of contrasted, you know, with Cordelia, like in the way that Oz is sitting there comforting and counseling Xander, the guy his girlfriend cheated on him with. Yeah. Right. And is still best friends with, and is still like, but Oz knows his value and he's decided that he's going to trust Willow, which means that, you know, he's fine. Like, he doesn't have anything to prove with Xander. And I love that. And then meanwhile, we've got Cordelia on the other side who is the one who's defining cool, who's like bringing this as a concept that Xander needs to live up to, and yet has absolutely no cool of her own, because here she is trying to take down Xander in any way that she can, because he hurt her. Yeah. You know, and she's still vulnerable to him. So when she says anything to Xander, it's completely in that light. Meanwhile, we've got Oz on the other side of that, who was treated the same way. He was on the other side of the same thing that happened to Cordelia. And he not only isn't beating up Willow about it, he's not beating up Xander about it. Yeah. Like, he's just like chill with it. So Oz is this ultimate example of what cool actually is, and it is something that does not claim coolness. Right. It just is. It's just a lack of that essential insecurity that creates most asshole behavior.
Right. And self-knowledge. Like, Oz doesn't, you know, Xander is searching for his thing. What is my thing? And Oz doesn't have that concern. He doesn't, you know,
he doesn't need a thing.
He doesn't need a thing because at least he seems to be really, really at peace with who he is. Now, you know, later on we'll see that get shaken up a little bit as Oz has to confront, you know, 4. Being a werewolf and like what it means to be a werewolf. But Oz as human Oz, as his, you know, usual Ozzy self, is very detached from the drama that's going on around him because it doesn't shake his foundation at all. Whereas poor Xander is just rattled by like literally everything that happens, completely rattles Xander to his core.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it's kind of like, it's really sad. Like, that was where I got with this episode ultimately, was like, Xander is really like, this is kind of a sad episode for Xander. Like, I feel for him in this this way that I did not expect to.
Right.
Because ultimately, Xander is cool in the most heartbreaking way. When Jack says, are you ready to die? And Xander says, I like the quiet.
Oh, yeah.
That's just gut-wrenching. That's gut-wrenching. Right. I mean, so Xander and O'Toole give us this really interesting and maybe problematic dynamic that I want to explore a little bit. Because we've heard several times about Xander's family. And the off-screen picture that we get is very much a picture of blue-collar struggle and pain. I mean, there's trouble with money and the law and alcohol and just regular human connection. I mean, Xander's mother doesn't recognize him over the phone.
Right.
So this is part of what makes Xander the least meaningful member of the group. He's the lowest on the socioeconomic ladder. And one way to give Xander some hero clout in the story is to make Jack O'Toole even lower status than Xander. And now we're talking about class, right? So Jack talks about his grandpappy, which conjures up a very specific image of a particular kind of Southern grandfather. Jack's go-to
Right.
conflict resolution device is his hunting knife. You know, and when he says he's going to carve, he tells Xander, I'm going to carve you up and serve you with gravy. It's like we're very much coding Jack O'Toole as poor white.
Yes.
And class-wise, he and Xander are closer to being peers than Xander and any of the Scoobies.
Sure.
So it almost seems to suggest that under different circumstances, Xander could have become a Jack O'Toole. In that search for community and connection, he could have gone this much darker route of crime and violence and this particularly toxic masculinity, you know, where they're driving around town screaming about beer and girls. It's very, very stereotypical. And it's very much tied to gender and gender roles and class. And I think that's fascinating.
Well, it also brings us to this nature versus nurture, this very like binary thinking that we really have. Really, there's a spectrum of that. But where has Xander's nurture been? You know, like it clearly doesn't come from his family. And I also like the fact that this car that he has is not his car. It's his Uncle Rory's car. And Uncle Rory is the one that we reference when we have a story to tell about Xander's terrible family.
Right.
Like he doesn't really necessarily tell stories about his dad very much, but like he will mention Uncle Rory. He will mention Uncle Rory, quiet taxidermist by day, but at night it was booze, whores, and fur flying, right? You know, so here we have this car that is essentially borrowed cool that comes from exactly his background. But I mean, it's this is a 57, like Bel Air Chevy, right?
Yeah.
Convertible car, obviously very well maintained.
Yeah.
Like, this is the kind of car that you would expect to drive out of Jay Leno's garage, you know, not Uncle Rory's. So I'm not sure what the story is behind this car, but I'm sure it's fascinating. But they do kind of come from this same space. But if you look at Xander and Jack, like, what is it that essentially separates them? And I mean, I think with Xander, it comes down to a sense of empathy, you know, of honor, of kindness, you know, and Jack just lacks all of that. But, you know, is it that, you know, do we have a similar instance with Xander that we had with Buffy and the Wish, right? Without their friends, without this group of friends holding them together, would they all have had different darker fates? Now, of course, in the Wish, without Buffy, Xander becomes a vampire. So we know the answer to that. He essentially does become Jack O'Toole.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, the performance that this guy is given in this episode is not a million miles off from what Nicholas Brennan was doing in The Wish.
Yeah. Yeah.
With Vampire Xander.
Yeah. Vampire Xander and Jack O'Toole actually have a lot in common.
They do.
In that.
So I guess it's just about the effectiveness of the soul. Right? You know, and the community as a saving grace, which I think is a theme that Buffy actually comes back to, you know, quite a bit.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. But there were a couple of things in here that I thought were really kind of interesting. And, you know, coming into this discussion with Xander and his need for cool and the, you know, kind of reflection with Jack O'Toole, and I came across like kind of a really uncomfortable idea because this is a concept that I'm highly, highly made uncomfortable by. And the idea that Xander is kind of a proto-incel at the beginning of this episode, right? Mm-hmm. And incel, by the way, is a highly offensive concept, I think, in general. And the people who self-identify as incels also are truly, truly offensive. But it's this idea that some, you know, you'll find these kind of like right-wing you know, spaces on the internet, where people will talk about men will talk about being involuntarily celibate, that they have not chosen to be celibate because women refuse to sleep with them. They are very, very angry about that and feel entitled to women's bodies. And there is a lot of very, very dangerous, disturbing things. I do not recommend looking up incel on the internet. Absolutely do not recommend it. It is highly, highly disturbing. But here we have Xander. We've talked a lot about Xander's sense of entitlement to women. Early, in season 1, he had a crush on Buffy and he felt very entitled to her affections. I guess a guy has to be undead to make time with you, right? And we see him using phrases that sort of speak to that sense of entitlement. We have this, he's complaining about, how you need to be in a band, you need to have a thing, but he played the flugelhorn and got 0 trim, right?
Is that an expression?
I think it is.
Okay.
I think I've heard that
an expression? I'm not conscious of having heard that before, but
I don't know. It's possible that I've just heard it so much in this episode, having watched this so much, that I've associated it and through context. And maybe it was like trying to make fetch happen. Maybe they just put it in there, and this is like the Buffy version of fetch. It just didn't happen. But I know what it means.
Totally.
Right? And we've heard that kind of construction around women as objects, conquest, and something that he gets and receives, as opposed to having a relationship.
Right.
With someone in which there is mutual sexual exploration and satisfaction. He is talking about it as something that is given to him. Like, he gets it, 0 trim. And so, first of all, the line itself is funny.
Yes.
First of all, the flugelhorn, never not funny.
Yeah.
That's just in and of itself never not funny.
Funniest instrument. Good job.
It is it's a funny name for an instrument. It's fantastic. I absolutely love it. And the phrase 0 trim is kind of funny. When you take it out of its really horrifying, dehumanizing context to women. It's just kind of a funny way of expressing that. So I appreciate that it was played for humor. But the joke rests on some disturbing societal presumptions. First of all, women as objects, that they are trim, and that sexual attention is a service owed to men rather than something shared between people who are in a relationship. Meanwhile, as he's having this discussion, he's having it with Oz, who represents the exact opposite of all of those ideas, and the fact that Oz is in there as something of a mitigating factor for Xander, I find really interesting, because Oz, of course, is perfect. He is cool without needing to be cool. He has respect for women, especially the woman that he is with. And so it feels like we are actively pointing out this sort of proto-incel attitude, and looking at it as cute and funny rather than the very truly dangerous thing that it actually is. Because when men feel entitled to something that they don't get, they often feel entitled to take it, or to kill people because of their anger at not having received something that they felt they were entitled to. This is something that we're dealing with, very openly. And in the 90s, I think we were still in this space where we would look at this stuff and think it was funny because it doesn't really happen. Like, we see this on the fringe, but we didn't realize how much that kind of mentality was actually a day-to-day part of the harassment that women receive.
Right.
Or not, we didn't realize. Mainstream culture, which is predominantly, run by white men, did not realize, all of them, I think, at this point, that this wasn't funny because this was very, very real, and extremely dangerous. And so here we have this kind of 90s look from this perspective of people who didn't necessarily mean harm, but also didn't realize the kind of harm that was going on a widespread basis because of these very ideas. So I don't know. Am I overreacting to Xander, to this idea of Xander as a proto-incel?
I don't think so. I think that reading is definitely there. I think there's Xander is so complicated in his relationship to sex and sexuality, because it's clearly it's this leitmotif with Xander. When we're raiding lockers in Gingerbread, he's concerned about the Playboy magazines that he has in his locker.
Yes.
He is freaked out by the notion of being discovered as being even sexually adjacent. But at the same time, he is very much motivated by this desire to be sexual, be seen as desirable. And I mean, I think that that's a very, I think that's a very relatable kind of vulnerability, you know, wanting to be desired. But he does take it into this very transactional space a lot of the time, which actually relates to something that I noticed in the episode that kind of broke my heart in a really surprising to me way, which is this conflict in Xander of asking for help versus asking to help. You know, he says, tell me what I can do. And then, of course, and then that's played for humor. We cut to the espresso pump where he's picking up donuts. He's picking up a donut order and, you know, very funny. But he keeps asking to help. Do you need any help? What can I do? When he runs into the Scoobies, when what he really wants and really needs is to receive help. Yeah. But he doesn't ask for it. He wants to be asked. I mean, it's very, it's just so heartbreaking that Xander wants the people he needs to need him back. He doesn't, he clearly feels very insecure about being so needy, about being so starved for attention. You know, and the way that when he interrupts Angel and Buffy, yeah, and he's trying so hard. Like, he almost gets it out. I've got this. Like, he's gone to Buffy because he knows she'll know what to do. And then he gets there and he just can't say it. And he settles on, can I help? And it, like, my heart kind of breaks for him. Yeah. Because he can't, he can't push past that wall of, like, needing to put up this, you know, this wall of, like, needing to act as though he has no needs. Yes. It's really, really sad to me. And I'm just, it is. Like, it kind of, it sort of caught me off guard how sad I found that whole recurring theme with Xander. Yeah. And I think,
well, he does. He wants to be wanted. He wants to be needed. And I think that that's a fairly human, you know, like, relatable thing. Like, we all want to have a role or have a way that we can serve, like, the people around us. But, like, his way of, like, finding his space and he says to Cordelia, I'm an integral part of the group. And she's like, whatever, you're the Zeppo, you know? Yeah. And so he's being told over and over and over again, no, we don't need you. You know, we want you away. We want you safe. Go get the donuts. Right. You know? And so that's a really hard thing for him to, I think, have. He wants, like, the help that he's asking for. He is asking for help in saying, can I help? Yeah. You know, can you use me? Because if you can't, I'm going to be stuck with these dead guys over here. Right. You know, but he, like, the help that he needs is to be needed. And he is constantly told throughout that he is not needed. And that is, like, you know, speaks to his essential insecurity. But the funny thing is that over with the group of the dead guys, he is needed. He's the wheelman. He comes in with an immediate role to play, you know, which is not something that he doesn't have a clear role. You know, we've got werewolves and we've got the Watcher and we've got the Slayer and we've got the Slayers and we've got, you know, Willow as the witch, and everybody has a role, but Xander doesn't really have a role aside from being the guy who gets, you know, beat up. Yeah. Right. You know, so it's interesting because he has that need to be needed. And then, like, once he realizes where his value is, that he has strength, that he can save the world by himself, because at that moment, had Jack succeeded in blowing up the school, and Giles and Buffy and Willow and everybody would have then failed to stop the apocalypse, then the school would have blown up, everybody would have died, and, you know, this demon would have taken over the world, you know? So he actually is able to kind of get Oz's quiet confidence there at the end. He doesn't need to tell them what he did. Yeah. You know, and it comes right off of Willow's line, the world is never going to know what we did. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And then they don't know what Xander did. Right. But he knows, and that's what's important. So one thing that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit is this idea of the penis metaphor, right? Because I saw something in this episode this time that somehow I've managed to kind of like either not notice or whistle past in the past, but it kind of jumped out at me this time. Buffy actually kind of calls this out with the car. She actually says, "Is this a penis metaphor?" Right?
It's such a delightful line reading.
It really is. It really is. But later on, after the bronze, right, you know, when Xander is there with this nameless girl who just loves cars, right, and they're leaving and he bumps into a car that actually does turn out not to be Jack's car. Jack just is there. He's just, I guess, the car he's trying to steal at the moment.
Yes.
And then Jack comes out and he pulls out this knife named for a girl, you know, and we actually have this scene. I've got this clip and I just kind of want to play this.
Yeah, great knife. Although I think it may technically be a sword. She's called Katie. You gave it a girl's name. How very serial killer of you. That's what I think we should be going.
Are you scared?
Would that make you happy?
Your woman looking on, you can't stand up to me. Don't you feel pathetic?
Mostly I feel Katie.
You know what the difference between you and me is?
Again, Katie's springing to mind.
Fear. Who has the least fear?
And it has nothing to do with who has the big, sharp.
Come on.
I want to go for a drive. I'm bored.
Oh, gee, I'm really sorry my life and death situation isn't exciting enough for you. Hey!
What's going on?
Nothing. Just wrestling.
O'Toole. What a surprise. He attack you?
No. Just blowing off steam. Two guys wrestling, but not in a gay way.
Do it somewhere else, huh?
All right, so
Xander.
that scene,
King of no
right?
homo, right? King of
no, seriously,
But-
the king of no homo. But that knife, like, it feels like the whole scene, if you read the knife as a penis metaphor, reads so differently.
It really does. I mean, it really, really does. And of course, Jack even kind of frames it that way. We didn't hear it in the clip, but the first thing
Where
he
do
says,
you want it?
Yeah, where
Right.
do you want it?
Where do you want it?
Yes, from the mouths of rapists. I mean, that's really
Right.
like that really, really sounds like possibly sexually assault-ish. And then Jack makes it about masculinity because he says, with your woman watching, you can't stand it. Yeah,
Right.
and just the gendered nature of this whole exchange that then ends with, but not in a gay way,
Right.
is really interesting. And
It is really interesting. And then we have that moment later on in the story where all the guys are talking about initiating Xander into the club.
Yes.
Right? We'll just make you gay by penetrating you with Jack's very, very big knife. Right?
Yeah.
And then we get that, come on, Xander, take it like a man. And so I don't think that this is deliberate, but again, I'm a big death of the author person, so I don't care if it's deliberate. If I
Right.
see it, then, you know, it's there. I mean, I think that there is something with the, I don't know, like that.
it's the homoeroticism.
It's a penis metaphor. It's
It's the homoeroticism of toxic masculinity. Because
Yes.
women under this like toxic masculine umbrella, women are objects. Women are like consumables, essentially.
Right.
But men really, like, all of their love and attention really is for other men. I mean, and we see that in Jack's gang. We see the way they are with each other. It's very, it's very friendly and very intimate. I mean, Bob and Jack hug after Jack raises Bob from the grave. They're palling around. They're very comfortable with each other. All of the respect and love and admiration under this toxic masculine umbrella is for other men. It's definitely there is a homo element to it. And I say that without judgment.
Right.
You know, that men consume women, men use women, but men love and attend to other men.
Yes.
And that is how you have power in this violent, you know, really like violent, literally smelly, gruesome gang of, you know, masculinity. It's a fascinating metaphor. It's really, really interesting. And I think
it is really interesting.
And it's actually a great fit for Xander in that so much of Xander's insecurity is tied to his lack of comfort with his own masculinity. I mean, I think we've talked about this a little bit with Shadow Xander, that it's this kind of overcompensation. You know, it's a performing of a hyper masculinity because he's so insecure about his own power and influence.
Yes.
And I think that we really, you know, Xander has these two choices, right? He's got the Scoobies who, when they exclude him, in order to protect him, the power there is really with the women. Our two slayers and Willow, who is the witch. Now we've got Watcher Giles, you know, protecting this unit, right? We have this like patriarchal in a good way, Giles, who is ready to die for Willow, but he understands that that's his role. His role as a man, you know, watching over this group is to lay down his life to save Willow and Buffy and Faith.
Yeah.
Whereas on the other side, you know, our other group here is this group of already dead guys with bombs, as Xander puts it, which I just love. But they're just, I mean, to exist in that kind of a group is to be doomed from the get-go. So Xander really doesn't have a place in either of these groups that are presented in this episode. And it, like, again, like I feel for Xander. I really do, which is weird. Like I'm feeling feelings that I did not expect to feel, but it's a really, like, when you break it down, it's this really vulnerable position to be in. Not fitting anywhere. And then at the end of the episode, he walks off alone. He doesn't sit down at the table with the Scoobies. He doesn't try to connect with Cordelia. He walks off by himself as this kind of...
Right, but he's happy about that, though.
Yeah.
There's a security in that he is able to achieve a confidence because he's faced toxic masculinity, looked it in the eye, and said, "Do you feel lucky, punk?"
Yeah.
You know? Like, and I feel like that for Xander is such a hugely transformative moment because he actually gains his confidence as a person and I think as a man. Because he's faced down like these toxic things that have been kind of hounding him from the beginning, you know? So I find that really interesting. Yeah. And the thing is that men are like victims of toxic masculinity too, you know, because this is something that it's not good for anybody. Toxic masculinity is toxic. It's not good for anybody. And the way in which they objectify and subjectify other identities, you know, anything that is not classic white male, right? And not that there isn't toxic masculinity and other identity. It just becomes complicated by that. The add white supremacy to the patriarchy and you get this very specific brand of toxic masculinity, you know? So you've got these guys and what they are told and what they are taught is essentially dehumanizing to them as well. And so here we have all of these guys who are dead. They have been killed by their, you know, toxic masculinity in one way or another. You know, it has killed all of these guys, and yet they're coming back and they're trying to take Xander down with them. He faces them off and actually, you know, is is victorious over it.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, when you look at all of that as this is what the toxic masculinity has done to these people, and Xander is not going to let it do it to him, it's really such a strong and hopeful ending. Even though he's by himself, he's secure enough in himself. Like, throughout this whole thing, he needs to be needed. You know, he has this, like, need. And in the end, he is happy just to be of service when he is needed.
Yep.
But he's confident in himself, which is something that up until this point, he's never had.
Right.
So it's kind of a really wonderful ending, I think. Like, I read that as such a powerful ending, a strong and happy ending for Xander, who is not going to let toxic masculinity kill him the way it's killed all these other guys.
For sure. Yeah, and I think it is a triumphant ending for Xander, but I think it is a tragic ending for men, like, as a group, like, that this is how, like, that there isn't, like, if you want to be the not toxic guy, there's not space for you. Like, you have to be secure in yourself, which, you know, we all should be, ideally, but it's just...
But it's very difficult to do. I mean, to have that kind of security, and not just for men, but, like, for everybody.
Right.
Like, there's always different things that, like, kind of hit us with insecurity, which is why Oz is so weird.
Yes.
You know, he's wonderful. I love him, but he's weird.
He's super weird.
You know?
He's also a werewolf. I mean, we've talked about this before, about how we have to undercut Oz's, you know, non-toxic masculinity, his cool, whatever that is, with this literal,
by
like,
giving
he is
him
a
wild
literal
fury
monster. He is a feral.
Yeah. He ate Jack.
I know.
He ate Jack. No, I'm weirdly full today.
I know.
And that's the joke, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Oz actually ate toxic masculinity for lunch.
Yep.
Like, that's the thing. Oz, as the representation of positive, healthy, secure masculinity, ate toxic masculinity for lunch. I mean, there you go.
It's wild. It's wild. And it's interesting to me that in this episode where we have this gang of, you know, already dead guys with bombs, which that is someone's band, right? Please tell me that's someone's band.
Dead guys with bombs,
dead guys,
I'm sure.
Already dead guys with bombs.
I'm sure. Yes. Or a podcast name. Like, the whole, like, that's my band name has kind of been subsumed into that's my podcast.
Oh, totally.
You know, show name.
Yes, there's my podcast. That's someone's podcast.
Right.
So on the one side we have zombie bros, and on the other side we've got these female demons. Which is
no, the female demons were interesting too.
Yep. In this episode that is very much from Xander's point of view. I love the shot sequence that brings us into the episode. I haven't talked much about the directorial choices in this episode, but there are a couple of moments that are really spectacular. And I think this opening is one of them, because we have, you know, there's like this mist because we're in this demon lair and it's kind of fantasy spooky, and we've got Faith lurking in the shadows, and we've got Buffy, and we've got Giles, and then Willow steps out with the candle and says something in Latin, and then there's this demon, this girl demon. I mean, one of my first notes is feminine sounding scream from the demon.
Right.
Like the demon bellow is even very feminine.
Right.
But this is unusual. I mean, we have this there's this like romantic sort of fog around this mostly girl group fighting this girl group of demons. And
yes,
I think it's fascinating that like the threat, the thing that's going to open the hellmouth, is scary women. In this episode,
the real power is female.
Yeah, in this episode that is about
real power is female.
Xander's point of view.
Well, and that is interesting because we don't often have demons coded as female. If anything, demons tend to be masculine in presentation because they're powerful and dangerous and all of that. But we haven't usually, like, if anything, we've like not gendered them, you know, but they always kind of like are masculine in presentation.
Right.
And to have female-coded demons, it doesn't happen very often. And when it does happen, we absolutely call it out that these are women, you know.
Yes.
But here we have this whole, like, you know, we have Xander in this protagonist sidecar. Right. Which is kind of interesting because his story, if you look at it, is, you know, clearly smaller than the story that Buffy and Faith and Willow and Giles are in, you know. They're battling this huge apocalyptic thing. Everybody's freaking freaked out. They're afraid of what is happening. It is so big and it is going to destroy the world, you know. And Xander's in this space where his story is much smaller, you know. And usually when we have the main story, you know, in any particular episode, it's the one with the most dramatic weight, the one with the biggest consequences, the one with the largest stakes, right? But Xander is actually like battling toxic masculinity, which is a huge like internal battle for him that he's been facing all the time. And it's actually externalized through the form of Jack and his dead friends, you know, the zombie bros. And so it's really interesting because what makes a protagonist is POV character, that they're in pursuit of an active goal, you know, and that so they're providing the motive force for the story in pursuit of that goal, and that they have the most at stake, you know. And so while we have all of this stuff externally happening, what is actually at stake for Xander is his sense of self. So we are battling that through externalized characters, but it is a very internal story for Xander. So it's really kind of fun to see him in this protagonist sidecar where you would look at what's happening with everybody else as the story with the most dramatic weight. But we are so deep inside Xander's POV that what has the most dramatic weight is actually his internal struggle with his own masculinity. And I kind of love the way that they've done that. And then, of course, to do that in the background with these female coded demons who are actually truly the most dangerous things that we've come up against based on what we're seeing from, you know, all of the other characters. You know, Willie the Snitch is beat up and he says, I suggest you and Angel just go away for an evening.
Right.
Think how you want to spend your last hours. Giles is freaking out talking to some kind of, you know, spiritual entity at the cemetery. No, Xander, you stay out of this. You know, we've got all of this stuff. It's so interesting. And I think just a really like brilliant choice to have the most danger come from this feminine side of this story, while this wrestling with the toxic masculinity is a different kind of danger, but also something that in the end, had Xander not won that battle, would have ended up destroying everything. You know, because it has such an incredible power for destruction, even while there's other stuff happening on the side, you know, that is, you know, I think what you would look at it if you're comparing, you know, apocalypses, is more important, is a bigger deal.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
But because of the essential wild, entitled destructiveness of this toxic masculinity, that could end up setting a fire that just makes everything worse for everybody. So I love all of this.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love, and I think it's kind of hilarious that as our first real group of female demons, the Sisterhood of Jay, are an apocalypse cult. Like they exist, I think Giles says, they exist solely to bring about the world's destruction. Like I just love, I love the like the anti-feminism of that. The like,
yes,
like, you know, the trouble with like groups of women together is that they will bring about the world's destruction.
Is that they will bring but I mean, from the perspective of toxic masculinity, isn't that what they're afraid of?
Totally.
Women who gather together, women with any kind of power. The fact that women go to the bathroom together freaks guys out. Like the whole thing.
Yeah.
If there are women, and you know, and it's funny because like over on Welcome to the End Times, which is the Good Omens podcast that I'm doing with Dr. Kelly Jones, right?
Yes.
We're discussing Good Omens, the book, and then we're discussing the TV show. So much fun. But we're having all of these discussions about they've got this Witchfinders army, right? And, and we've got to find the witches and we've got to kill the witches. And it's actually hugely misogynistic. Not the book itself, but they are representing things in the book that are in and of themselves. The whole witch thing is hugely misogynistic. It's about, making sure that women never have enough time to like understand their power, or that women don't fight back.
Yeah, the witch thing is about knowledge and power. I mean, the word witch is related to the word wisdom. Like, it's about knowledge and power. So yeah, a witch hunt is absolutely about keeping women in their place. It's air quotes.
It's about keeping women in their place. And right now we're doing that through abortion laws. So we'll do it in one way or another, no matter what. The patriarchy must keep women in their place. Right. And that is the battle that's, at hand. So to have these powerful women represented as the true danger in a story that is essentially about Xander's internal battle with his own toxic masculinity, I think is brilliant. I love it.
And I love that we hear several times that the Sisterhood of Jay, in addition to being, set on destroying the world, are also super tough. Yeah. Like, I think Buffy says that they're too fit or something like that. Like, which, first of all, I'm like, yes, of course we're gonna approach the female demons by commenting on their bodies and their physical fitness.
On their bodies, exactly.
Naturally. But I also kind of love that we've got this group of, powerful young women in Buffy, Faith, and Willow against this. Yes. I mean, they're called the Sisterhood. Like, really, like, it's the most straw feminist, kind of demon cult you could, really now.
Right. So why don't I hate it?
I don't know.
It seems like the kind of thing that I would really hate and be offended by. But for some reason, because it is wrapped up in this story about battling and winning over toxic masculinity, it works for me.
Yeah, and about...
because it represents an accuracy in the way that powerful women are viewed.
Well, and also because we're so deep in Xander's POV. Like, from the first shot, this is very much about how Xander sees the people in his life. He's, and of course he's unconscious at that point, but it's still it's still very much about how Xander sees the world.
Right.
So yeah, like, I'm okay with it as a look at Xander's own insecurities. But speaking of Xander's insecurities, there's a very very important thing that happens in the Zeppo.
Yes.
With Faith.
This is big.
This is huge.
Yes.
This is huge. So we have this encounter between Xander and Faith. First of all, poor Faith, who is still living at that horrible motel.
What is going on? Why does nobody give her a place to live?
Seriously. Like,
no, I mean, and later on when the mayor gives her an apartment and sees to her needs, like, honestly, I don't blame Faith that much, because the mayor, is dangerous and horrible and toxic in his own way, of course. Evil, but at the same time, like, he's actually taking care of her. And meanwhile, we've got the Watchers Council, we've got Giles, we've got Joyce, we've got everybody is failing Faith.
I'm so mad at Joyce
in so many ways.
I'm so mad at Joyce. Joyce isn't even in this episode.
Big house. I
Joyce
know.
is not.
Joyce is never there. She can have Joyce's room. Like,
Joyce isn't even in this episode.
And as
makes
we're
me
going
so
to see,
mad.
and in a couple of seasons, we're going to have Dawn's room, which apparently is just a storage room at this point. We never see it. But you're going to tell me that huge house has 2 bedrooms? It has a couch at the very least. Faith should be staying with Buffy. And she's not. She's living in this terrible, terrible motel room. But anyway, that's a discussion that we're going to be having in the future. I just had to rant about that for a little bit.
It makes me mad.
With Faith and Xander.
Faith and Xander makes me mad. But it does, the thing that it does anchor us to in this episode is the classism that I talked about earlier with Xander and Jack O'Toole, bringing Faith in. Faith's socioeconomic status is part of what enables this scene and this connection.
Yeah.
Which, again, interesting and problematic, but we're deep in Xander's POV. And I think that there's something to that. I mean, I love the way this plays out. I love the way she says, hold me. And it's strictly practical, so she can pop her shoulder back into place. I mean, and both of their performances are just great. They are fantastically comfortable / uncomfortable. And I'm curious about, did you notice the soundtrack in this not quite seduction scene?
I noticed that it was a little more romantic than I kind of had wanted it to
There's
be.
this bell that chimes kind of rhythmically in the background. And I really want to say something about that, but I don't know what that is.
Well, I mean, this is a big moment, right? I mean, this is Xander's virginity, and as much as virginity is actually
sexual
a
debut
construct, a construct more than anything else, because it is based solely on the penetration of a man into a woman, when sexual discovery is actually a less a single moment and more a spectrum of things, as is typically the
sexual
case.
Debut.
Sexual debut,
never been
right?
up with people
this
before.
Is his first time. Never been up with people, exactly. So we have this moment where he is, and his view of it, and I think that's part of the reason why, like, the soundtrack is actually the music in the background is romantic. We have this moment of cuddling afterward before the music dies completely, and she kicks him right out, right? Which is hilarious. I love all of that because it shows so clearly how his perspective on this is so different from hers, because she just needs a little satisfaction.
Yeah.
She just needs a scratching post, and that is all he is to her.
It's strictly practical.
And,
it is practical. Xander wanted to be of service, and now he gets to be of service.
And now he is absolutely of service. And Xander, who is, who we see earlier, I played the flugelhorn, never got any trim, right? Who is objectifying this sense of entitlement to sexual service from women, actually ends up becoming the servicer for a woman.
Yeah, he becomes the sex object. Which is really interesting. And and I love that we go into the actual sex, such as it is, with, did I mention I'm having a very strange night? Like, that just speaks to identity so deeply in a way that just kind of guts me. But the actual sex, I think this is very interesting, is shown reflected in the TV screen in the motel room.
Yeah.
And that shot alone is so deeply meaningful as a statement about how television reflects and perpetuates cultural ideas about, in this case, sex and sexuality, but really everything that, it shows us, television shows us how we relate to each other. So here we have this picture in a picture of sexuality, and it's fascinating to me, but it's also a great internal Xander moment. The line that leads us into the shot, did I mention I'm having a very strange night? Has he been giving her a soft no this whole time? Because he's very uncomfortable. She tells him to take off his pants and relax, and he says those are antithetical.
Those are antithetical.
So that shot of the TV, I wonder if he's disassociating a little bit.
Oh God, that's really interesting.
Isn't that,
I hadn't really thought about it that way, because Xander has, of course, been talking about, getting action for a really, really long time, and then when he does, he gets it in a way in which the tables are reversed, right? And he is actually the one who is being objectified and being used in that way, but whether he's really okay with that or not, because this is a thing that happens with this particular brand of, if you want to call it date rape or whatever, there are a lot of different ways in which consent is violated. And oftentimes, with the victim of that, sometimes they don't say no, but they just shut down, because when somebody is pressuring you in that way, sometimes the response during rape is often to shut down and just let it happen until it's over, which is what makes it consent so complicated. Well, actually, it's not complicated. Get an enthusiastic yes or back the fuck off. Like, that's it, you know? And it is the responsibility of everybody in the room to be sure that the yes and the is enthusiastic, you know? And Xander's, lack of a yes, lack of enthusiastic. I mean, he's responding because you respond, because bodies respond to things, you know? That does not necessarily mean that emotionally and mentally consent is given. And so I think that, like, this particular instance, could you read it as a sexual assault, as rape? I mean, yeah, I think you could.
Yeah, well,
I'm not sure, because without really understanding, I mean, there's no enthusiastic consent. So I mean, I think that in and of itself, it puts us in this spectrum.
And even separate from rape and sexual assault, I mean, I certainly, I'm not going to speak for the entire world, but I've certainly had sex where I realized maybe part of the way through that I was not as into it as I thought, you know, like, I think a lot of us have had sex when we maybe were not feeling so sure about it, even if we liked and cared about the person. Even if we were attracted to the person, it's a complex thing. And I think that, you know, whether or not you want to read this as sexual assault, on Faith's part, I think there's definitely a disconnect for Xander between what he imagined his sexual debut would be like and what it actually ends up, like what this experience actually feels like for him. And I think that's really
interesting. It's very complicated. And we do get into this binary language with it as well. You know, it is rape or it is not rape. It is sexual assault or, you know, like, but the thing is that there is this space. I think that what it comes down to is that culturally we've been doing sex wrong. You know?
For sure. We're terrible at sex.
Absolutely.
We're terrible.
We've been doing it wrong. Because the thing is that, like, what needs to happen is a regular check-in for enthusiastic consent all the way along, you know, and that has to happen. And it is, and that is the responsibility of the parties involved. But the way that we have been taught to treat sex is that if there is not a violent no, you know, that if somebody is just kind of going along with it, that it's okay. And I mean, the thing is that happens. We don't know. So it's not like I see Faith as an aggressor, she's definitely the aggressor. She is initiating, you know, she is asserting, but I don't see Faith as being a sexual assailant.
No, I don't think so.
You know, and so it's one of these spaces where it is possible for Faith to not be like an assailant here, while at the same time Xander's kind of lack of enthusiasm, lack of like being able to process everything that's happening while it's happening, also creates in this experience for him, you know, a complicated experience, like a complicated emotional, mental, physical experience for him. So it's definitely, and I think that that's true. And I know that, like, you know, there's probably going to be because Faith's a woman, she's not an assailant.
People of all genders.
No, a man in this circumstance,
people
absolutely.
of all
like
genders
a man in this
can
circumstance,
be
you can understand
assailants. Like, that's not. It's not about, you know. It's
right, but it's not that if these tables were turned and Faith's part was being played by a man.
Well, and that's an interesting question. If you
gender flip this, would we still hold the Faith character or not necessarily responsible?
Or if, you know, in the world where we don't do the gay panic and Xander is in fact homosexual and this is a man and Faith is a man who is, you know, don't worry. Like, I'll tell you what to do, essentially.
I'll steer you around the curves.
Like, and it's great. It's a great line for Faith. It's very cheeky.
Yeah.
This is a wonderful scene for Faith in that it's very much in her character. And Eliza Dushku's performance is fantastic. Her just kind of like, this is strictly practical for her. This is it's fun. This is a great fun thing that she's going to do. Whereas Xander is having this like deep emotional roller coaster that he's been on.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to me to think about a scene like this one. If you gender flip it or you change up the sexual orientations of the folks involved or, you know, anything like that, then the power dynamic shifts, and we can see, and really what we see there is like where our biases are about like who can be, who is capable of being raped and who is capable of raping. And the, you know, of course, the real answer is that people of all sexes and genders can rape and be raped. Which is not, you know, and that is not me saying that this is a rape scene, just I like the time and attention that is given to Xander's experience of this experience. And then, of course, you brought up the moment where they're lying in bed and he's kind of stroking her arm really sweetly, which is a nice parallel to the way that Willow strokes Werewolf Oz's fur. Like, it's this sweet, affectionate motion. But then, of course, abrupt cut, the music screeches to a halt and she throws him out. That was great. Got a shower. And he's standing there holding his clothes in front of himself like, what the hell just happened? And then there's this moment, this quiet moment when Xander gets in the car and he's fully dressed now and he seems kind of reflective. And he reaches into the back of the car for what he thinks are cake ingredients because he's looking for comfort food. I mean, does he want to get some oxytocin from a can of frosting? It's like, it's so sad.
Cans of frosting are fantastic for situations just like this.
Yeah, a can of frosting. I mean, really.
Yeah.
And he comes up, you know, of course, he comes up with kerosene and bomb ingredients. It's such an interesting coda to a man's sexual debut is violence, right? And then he says, and then we see him later on, he says, I can't believe I had sex. Okay, bombs. Like, he just, like,
there's so
much in that light switch flip of train of thought. Like, he's not even allowing himself the time to process what has happened to him because of the situation. Like, there's danger happening, but also this, you know, bigger picture, this idea that men can just flip-flop from sex to violence and that is your role as a man to do this thing without
when they're often related,
without processing, you know? Without, it's like, it breaks my heart. I'm so sad. I'm so sad about all of it.
It's so complicated. I mean, it really is a very complicated, very interesting, very psychologically and emotionally kind of crunchy story.
Yeah.
You know, I love the way this whole thing is constructed. And then, of course, you know, we've got Xander, right, with all of his stuff happening alongside this huge apocalyptic moment. You know, everybody's freaking out. Giles is freaked out at the cemetery. Willow's freaked out at the magic shop before she leaves. She says, I love you, Xander, in case they all die. Like, she's, you know, Faith, who is like one of the toughest badasses, like, in the entire universe of the Buffyverse, is unable to beat this demon, and Xander comes in and saves her with his car, you know? And then we get, and this, I think, honestly, is one of my favorite things ever. Buffy and Angel's melodramatic scene. They're both crying. Close your eyes. They pulled out close your eyes. And I was like, a TV show? What are you doing? This is a joke. And I am in my feelings. Like, I know nothing. We've had no context for all of this throughout the entire episode. The vast majority of the episode, we've been living inside Xander's wrestling with toxic masculinity. So all of this stuff that's been happening in the background is just stuff like, we've seen this before. You know, this is same verse, second verse, same as the first, you know, not our first rodeo with this. So this is stuff we've seen with, I love you. I love you. I can maybe give you time, and I can't watch you die. I know, like, all of this stuff, it is a joke. I am in my feelings. And let me just go ahead and play this for everybody for a moment so that they can understand how this feels.
Love you.
I love you.
This kills me. I watched this scene and I'm practically crying.
Don't talk to me like
with
that.
With no context.
You may be ready to go, but I am not ready to lose you. Okay, this is my fight. And if you won't do it my way, then you're...
Xander clears his throat. The music stops.
There's this, This is probably a bad time.
It's probably a bad time. It kills me, but when they start playing Close Your Eyes in that scene,
yeah,
I'm dying. I'm dying in that moment, and I'm crying, and I'm like, no, Buffy, Angel, you know.
Yeah, well, and it's a great counterpoint to the music that comes in when Xander is being chased through the high school. You know, they're chasing and it's a very like
it's a Keystone Cops kind of comedy chase music. Yeah.
Marx Brothers too. I mean, the title of the episode is a reference to the Marx Brothers, but it has that very like kind of. Like, we're running through the school. There's this great string leitmotif that comes in. I think it first comes in when Jack adopts Xander as his car guy.
Yes.
And it continues throughout whenever there's, you know, Xander zombie bro antics. And it so changes the tone of everything that's happening, because this is like legit peril.
Yes.
At the end, they're running through the high school. There's a bomb. There's Sisterhood of J demons everywhere. The Hellmouth monster has grown.
Come up through the it has grown. It has come up through the floor again. Like what they're going to have to do to fix this. And also, like, you know, for no small part of this, something that we need to kind of like address is that we are coming off of Helpless. Giles betrayed Buffy last fucking week. And so when we have this moment at the end, right, where they're all sitting outside and like no one will ever know what we did, and then Buffy looks at Giles and says, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen. You know, he sacrificed himself, or, you know, attempted to sacrifice himself to save everybody. All of this is just, it's so incredibly effective and works for me on both levels, on Xander's level and on this big story level. I don't know how they did that, but using Close Your Eyes, let me just say, if you play Close Your Eyes at any point, I don't care what's going on in that scene, I am going to cry. It is like instant Pavlovian response for me. Oh, God. Don't play that song. It's mean. It's emotionally manipulative and mean.
Oh. I mean, television and visual storytelling in general is great for playing with our feelings.
Yes.
Like, this is.
I mean, it's supposed to be emotionally manipulative. That's what stories do, but still. Close Your Eyes is like unfair. God damn, that piece of music kills me every time. All right, there's one more thing that I wanted to talk about in this week's episode, and this episode was written by Dan Weber, right? And Dan Weber also wrote like one of my favorite episodes in the entire run of Buffy, which is Lover's Walk, which we had a few weeks back, right? And one of the things, the Zeppo is really good. Lover's Walk, of course, is a work of staggering genius, you know, wonderful, wonderful stuff. And so one of the things that has always happened for me is that I've always looked at these 2 episodes in season 3 and I'm like, why is Dan Weber not a staff writer, you know, on the show? Like, what the hell happened that he wasn't, you know, brought on? And it wasn't until recently I was watching a live stream done by Ian Martin, Passion of the Nerd. And some of you may remember he stepped in to pinch hit for Noelle during Amends.
Thank you, Ian.
Yes, thank you, Ian. It was wonderful, and the response to that was fantastic. So everybody absolutely loves Ian, and he did a great job. Although you were missed, Noelle, during that week.
Yeah, sure. No,
you were very much. No, I had Noelle do the Patreon Ask for that week because I couldn't stand not having her voice in one of the Still Pretty. So Noelle has appeared in every single episode and will as long as I have any say of it. But anyway, so Ian was talking about, like, he looks at the it was Lover's Walk that he was talking about. And he watches the extra textual stuff. I don't engage with the extra textual stuff. I don't look at the DVD extras. I don't look at interviews with writers or cast or Joss Whedon. I don't read articles behind the scenes. I don't do any of that stuff because when I look at these stories, I want to just be talking about the story itself. But one thing I do, which actually is extra textual, is look at who the writers are, because there are certain things that certain writers do. There is a very Whedonian, I think, influence in Lover's Walk. You can feel Whedon's fingerprint on that episode. And Ian was talking about it, and he had read something or watched one of the DVD extras or something, where Joss Whedon was talking about how he had basically gone in and like rewritten Lover's Walk, which of course makes sense to me because it is very Whedonian. On this episode, Jane Espenson and Doug Petrie are story editors, and they're story editors for all of season 3. But this episode to me has an Espensonian thumbprint on it. Like, it feels very Jane Espenson to me, even though Dan Weber wrote it. And so I don't know what happened. I don't know like how all of this stuff shook out. And of course it is impossible for me to say, and I don't have any right to say anything. But one of the things that I kind of realize is that, you know, on a TV show, while you will have certain episodes written by Jane Espenson, by Doug Petrie, by Marty Noxon, Tim Minear, you know, you can feel like their kind of style very much influencing stories that they've written. At the same time, I feel Espenson, I feel Noxon, I feel Petrie, I feel Minear, I feel Whedon at certain points in other episodes, because all TV episodes are written by the entire staff, you know? Right. And somebody coming in, a certain number of episodes are required by the Writers Guild every season for a certain number of episodes to be written freelance. And if you get a script that is written freelance that needs, you know, like the kind of attention that the TV staff will need, sometimes I think that can get very highly rewritten, because it is very difficult as a freelance writer, when you're not on staff, when you're not in the room all the time, to get all of the beats absolutely right, to understand all the characters as well as you need to, and that kind of thing. So anyway, I always have this thing where I don't go extra textual. I don't do it, you know, because I don't want it to influence my read. But it has influenced my read in the past when I've talked about Dan Weber, and Ian bringing that up, you know, kind of gave me a broader context for every single script that is written for any TV show is written by the whole room. Right. You know, after a while you get a feel for the styles of very particular writers, but the whole room is involved in every single episode. So my railing against the system that kept Dan Weber from getting a full-time job at Buffy. I mean, who knows? Dan Weber, clearly a good writer. These are 2 really great episodes. May have gone off to do something else and been hired by another show. I have no idea. But anyway, these are all considerations when talking about who the writers are. But I have to say that Lover's Walk to me felt like a Whedon script, and the Zeppo feels like a Jane Espenson script to me. And I don't know how much Jane Espenson might have gone in and retooled some of this, but it feels very, very Espensonian to me, and I kind of love that voice in this episode, in the Zeppo. And I think there's so much stuff that has just been kind of brilliantly done in this episode, and the deeper I look at it, the more I really, really appreciate it and like it.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that, there are several jokes and lines that feel very much like Jane Espenson's writing to me. You know, O'Toole will macrame your face. That has Espenson all over it. But my understanding of television writing and how that works is very much what you described, that you bring, you bring folks on and their name may be the name that appears in the credits as written by, but an executive story editor can rewrite anything. A show creator can rewrite anything.
So stuff. And often does. They often do. Yeah.
And it's kind of, it's one of the sort of weird things about television writing credits is that it will say written by and give you maybe 1 or 2 names, when the reality is that not every line or every story beat comes from the person whose name is credited.
Appears on it. And the extent to which, there is a certain amount of every single script. No script, I think, in a TV writer's room, this is my understanding of it, is ever entirely written by one person. It's always the entire story beats. The story beats are broken by the entire room. You know, somebody goes off to type it. You know, but and then they will bring their own, flavor to these episodes. I see Doug Petrie's, fingerprint really strongly, Marty Noxon's perspective, Jane Espenson's sense of humor, Whedon's emotional manipulation. These are all things, which is what I love him for. That's what stories are. But Whedon will emotionally manipulate the fuck out of everybody, and that is what he does. He's good at it, and it's why we love him. But you see all of those things, and they're all kind of like different things that you see after a while. You kind of get used to certain people's styles. But for the most part, like every script is written by everybody, and there will be a Jane Espenson joke in a script that's not written by her, but I know it's Jane Espenson because I can feel it. There will be a Marty Noxon hit, so there's really, really good stuff going on here. So my railing about, Dan Weber not getting, a full-time job on Buffy, I take it all back. I understand why. It's fine. I understand. All right. So, Noelle, what are you wearing?
Buffy owns a lot of heavy coats for someone who lives in Southern California.
It is like January, February at this point, but still.
Yeah,
but
come
still.
on.
Yes.
Come on. I mean, really. But I like the way that they make her look very official. Like,
no, they do.
She is doing Slayer business in her official
and her,
Buffy
her heavy coat. Yeah.
Her heavy coat. No, I don't have a lot of costuming notes for this episode.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't really end up being about that. But you have some hair notes that I'm very interested in.
I came up with this a couple years ago, this curly-haired Buffy theory, that every time Buffy has curly hair, we're in a bizarro world. And this, or a world that has been altered by magic or something has happened to make things weird. It's a weird episode. And this will actually hold true for most of the run. There's like one or two where Buffy just has curly hair for no reason, and it's completely normal episode. But for the most part, we get curly hair Buffy and Be or Bad. We get curly hair Buffy and Something Blue, and Halloween.
Yeah.
Like all of these,
awesome.
whenever Buffy has curly hair, the world is weird. And so we're going to be following this theory throughout. But I noticed Buffy had crimped hair. And this is one of the first times, aside from Halloween, right? Which she was wearing a wig, but it was curly hair, right? Aside from Halloween, I think this is the first time that we've had, Buffy's actual hair be curly. And of course, it is a weirdo, bizarre world. Now, not in every Bizarro World episode does she have curly hair, but in the ones where she has curly hair, so like not everything, all squirrels are furry, but not everything is furry is a squirrel, right? So she's she just has her curly hair in this episode, and so it's interesting. I'm going to try to like keep track of it and see, but I know there's like, I had this whole theory and we were running through Buffy and I'm like, yeah, I've got it, curly hair means Bizarro World, and then we'd have a curly haired Buffy episode with nothing particularly weird happening in that episode. But I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to see if I can read something into curly hair Buffy every single time. All right, Noelle, so what's your girl power moment of the week?
I don't think that this is a big win for feminism or anything, but I really enjoy Faith popping her own shoulder back into place.
That is badass. That is badass.
That's just great. She just knows exactly what to do and just
I like Faith, taking the initiative with the sex. I mean, of course, we do have some questions about, the enthusiastic consent part of it, which she fails to obtain. But overall, I like that she's like, yeah, that's great. Got a shower,
So good.
I think it's okay. All right. So what's your favorite part?
My favorite part is the exchange between Giles and Buffy and Willow about jelly donuts. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. Did you have all the jelly
I'm always
donuts?
the one who says, let's have jelly in the mix.
Let's have a jelly in the mix. And then Willow just completely caves and says, we're sorry. Buffy had 3.
Throwing Buffy under the donut bus. I mean, come on.
Right?
But Buffy slays. Buffy is supposed to have a lot of donuts.
But it was so great. I love that sweet Xander made a point of getting 4 jelly donuts because presumably he knows that Giles likes them and Buffy likes them and Willow likes them.
Yes.
And I'm just like, that's just so dear. But
it was incredibly sweet.
Willow throwing Buffy under the jelly donut bus is so great. And Giles being so miffed. He's so miffed. We've talked about this with the jelly donuts.
We've talked about
it. Clearly, his whole affect says, not again.
Yeah. When you're fighting evil, you need to have your snacks. You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
yes.
Very important.
And I like that donuts are the go-to
Yes.
fuel for research mode and saving the world. I feel that. Yeah.
Although, I do have a concern. All those donuts, all those rare books. Like, I'm sure that Giles must have a whole thing where he's like, no, wash your hands before you touch my books after the donuts.
Yeah, Dad Giles is going around with like napkins and wet wipes and everything after the
Absolutely.
Yeah,
no, those books are serious. I'm surprised that they don't have to wear little white gloves when they deal with the books. But when you're in the middle of an apocalypse, you do what you can.
Right. Desperate times. What's your favorite part, Lani?
Oh God, I love Xander at the end. I love Xander when he confronts Jack, and Jack's like, "Well, you're going to die too," and he's like, "Yeah, okay, I like the quiet." He is completely prepared to die to save everybody else. And he's calling Jack's bluff. He's like, "I'm in your way. You're not going to be able to get out of here in time. I don't like your chances." So do you want to be regular dead, or do you want to be blown up, getting picked up by a janitor dead?
Yeah.
And I love Xander's confidence. I love Xander. This is this transformative moment. This is the inflection point for, early Xander, super problematic, to later Xander, who is also problematic, but maybe less so and in very specific instances. So actually, I just really like that. I like that moment for him.
All right, that's it for today. To join in the discussion on Twitter, follow Lani at Lani Diane Rich and me at Noelle Aloud, and use the hashtag StillPretty.
Or you can keep Chipperish Media going to the tune of $1 a month or more and gain access to the live chat and Discord, where you can hang out with me and Noelle and all the Chipperish patrons who are having a very strange night.
You can also show your support by giving Still Pretty a great review on Apple Podcasts, or by telling your friends about the show, or by wrestling in as gay a way as you care to make it.
That's right. We will be back next time with Bad Girls, the 14th episode of Season 3. Until then, there was no part of that wasn't fun.